we've seen a massive, what I would call once in a generation structural shift in the way that this industry works. Application volumes have gone through the roof. The cost of applying for a job has gone through the floor, right? There's mass application tools, there's all of the LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude. Their CVs look the same, they look great on paper, they've used the same tools to tailor their applications, and that creates an exponential headache for recruiters.
Welcome to the Work Intelligence Lab podcast. I'm your host, Karla Fletcher.
And I'm John Julitz.
So by 2030, 39% of core skills are expected to change, and 22% of jobs will be fundamentally reshaped. But most organizations, after a year of talking about this or more, still don't have clear visibility to their own talent to make confident decisions.
And at the same time, we're seeing a new wave of AI providers coming through faster, cheaper, and more specialized, which means some of the early leaders in this space are already being challenged.
And talent and hiring, clients are really not interested in whether it's AI that gets them there or automation. What they care about is the best talent at the right price in a way that complements their scalability.
So maybe the question isn't how much AI do we use? Maybe the real question is, what problem are we actually trying to solve?
And that's why we've invited our guest, Greg Dunbar from Hubert AI. And Greg, I know you've got AI in the title of your business, but if we strip that away completely, what is the problem that you at Hubert AI are actually trying to solve for?
Thanks, Karla and John, and thank you for having me on the podcast. Pleasure to be here today. That's a great place to start. I couldn't agree more, by the way. Start with the problem in mind. I think AI often is, we're in that trap again in this kind of wave of new technology of kind of using it as a solution looking for a problem rather than actually starting with the problem, which is always what we should be doing. So look, I mean, selfishly, I think that Hubert is here to solve what we see and hear is one of the biggest challenges that recruiters are facing in the industry today. The business was actually founded to help with high volume hiring, to bring efficiency to high volume hiring, and to help customers to scale skills-based hiring. So to solve some legacy challenges. That's kind of where the business started 5-6 years ago. But actually what we've seen happen in the last couple of years has kind of strengthened our hand, if you like, but it's, we've seen a massive, what I would call once in a generation structural shift in the way that this industry works, a structural shift in the way that candidates are applying for jobs. And it's caused an enormous headache for recruiters. And what I mean by that is, and I'm sure anyone listening to this will recognize this, application volumes have gone through the roof. The cost of applying for a job has gone through the floor, right? There's mass application tools, there's all of the LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude. Candidates are either using the large language models, or they're using mass application tools or one-click apply to apply en masse. And we hear from customers that application volumes have risen 2, 3, even kind of tenfold just in the last couple of years. You couple that with the fact that it's harder now than ever before to differentiate those candidates, right? Because more and more of them look the same. Their CVs look the same. They look great on paper. They've used the same tools to tailor their applications. And that creates an exponential headache for recruiters. And that's really the problem that we're here to solve. It's what we call the talent differentiation crisis. And that's really, where Hubert, brings value today.
And I think when we talk about what people are saying about AI, particularly in the job space, the labor market, there's a constant criticism about, well, candidates are using AI, recruiters are using AI, so it's AI talking to AI. How do you deal with that challenge to make sure, what we would say, human in the loop, people are at the heart of it, augmenting versus replacement? What does Hubert do to account for that, to sort of make it more if you want to call it human, more personal, that there is a human touch involved, because, that criticism of AI talking to AI is something that continues to come up.
Yeah, I mean, huge question. So I should probably backtrack a little bit just for anyone listening and explain a little bit about what we actually do. So Hubert is an AI screening agent, and what we do is we solve the problem I just described. We're effectively helping recruiters find the fastest path to the best talent, but we're also here to help candidates find the fastest path to the best job. We believe that, for the reason you've just explained, that CV screening, even using AI now to screen CVs or to look at application forms and sort of traditional ways of hiring, even that is now obsolete for exactly the reason that you're just describing. It's impossible for even AI to really know how good a representation is the CV of the candidate, right? How is the best candidate the candidate that didn't use AI, or one of the many that are now starting to look the same. So the way that we tackle that is by using what we call predictive interviewing. It's structured, skills-based interviews right at the start of the application journey to replace application forms, CV screening, even telephone screening, and condense that all into one really short, intuitive, 10, 15-minute, very human-like conversational application and screening interview, all in one process. You can do it by text, you can do it by phone, there's voice options. So you're meeting the candidate where they are. You're meeting the candidate on their terms. Over 60% of the applicants, of the candidates that use Hubert, are actually doing it on their own time. So they're able to do this from their sofa, they're able to do it in front of the TV or on the train on the way home from work. And it is a very human-like experience. Now, look, doesn't entirely solve your question about AI, because I think I know what the next question is going to be. But just to set the scene a little bit, that's what Hubert does, and we're fundamentally changing legacy processes to bridge the gap better between candidates and recruits, making sure at the same time that every candidate gets a better experience.
I've got so many questions. I'm going to try not to line them all up at you at one time. But I think one of the things I was looking at, and it's been a stat that's come up often, is about 30% of candidates drop out of this hiring process after discovering it's an AI-led interview. And not only that, but it's the experience that they're having is not satisfactory. So how are you taking that into mind? Because I remember when we were talking, you were talking about this as a scientific approach to this, a psychological approach that you've embedded in what you do. It isn't just AI based.
Yeah, I think there's a few questions in one there. So
Oh, it's too many. I've got a habit of doing that. I need to
no, that's good.
scale
No,
them back a
no,
little
no,
bit.
good question. I've just got to try and remember is it AI? The second question is it AI based? Let's come back to that, because that's a really interesting point. But I'm interested, where did the 30% number come from? Or is it sort of, because that's not what we see, but I have a suspicion I don't think that's specific to Hubert, right? I think you're talking generally
It's
speaking.
more broadly. No, it's definitely not specific. It's the broad. It was a broad headline from People Management 2026.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And look, to answer that first, I think there's a lot of really bad practice out there. I think that maybe is true, and we're starting to hear, the younger generation backlashing against, AI-led recruitment processes. I'm happy to, admit that. I think that's because there's been a lot of really bad practice, and so when we talk about AI application process or AI interview, even that can mean a lot of different things. And if we start with video, for example, I think, there was a huge trend towards asynchronous avatar-based, videos talking to an AI avatar. I personally think that's a terrible experience. That's not what Hubert does. We see a massive drop-off when people are invited into that, whether that's blue collar, white collar experience, senior hires, right across the board. I've been through some of those, and I think they're terrible. Apologies to anyone out there that may be selling that kind of technology. I think that is a little bit dehumanizing. And then a lot of there's well documented court cases happening in the US right now where people have been screened out by AI in the middle of the night without a human being involved, and it creates quite a negative feeling. And so I think it's all down to the experience that you're able to actually provide the candidate. And if you're treating candidates the way you would like to be treated, which is a fundamental principle for Hubert, Hubert's interviews are not stressful. They're very low anxiety. They're not video based. We do voice, but actually we see a massive conversion. So contrary to what you were saying, we actually get conversion rates more in the mid 90s. 96 is our average conversion rate. We get candidate satisfaction scores 9 out of 10. Actually, we're working with Manpower. These are your statistics, by the way. We see this with Manpower. So we get great candidate satisfaction scores. And funnily enough, candidates prefer to take the text option. So we have a branded browser-based experience. So it's text through a browser. It's really simple. It's intuitive. It's like talking to your friend. It is very low anxiety. It's not timed. The questions are reasonable. The feedback is measured and reasonable. They get to know how they've performed in real time. And they have the voice option if they want to take that as well. So we give them the optionality, but what we see is candidates actually opting for the thing that recruiters maybe think is the least exciting, and that's a text-based interview. So we're not seeing those kind of statistics, but I think it is all down to the experience that you give the candidate.
So you just set me up for basically what I'm going to set us up for, which is AI is everything. It's the magic. I've just said an AI interviews in a very broad scope, but that could mean so many things in so many different ways. And this is what I'm seeing and hearing we're at risk of is kind of the AI blanket case that we have for everything. And with that is becoming this intense fatigue where we were having a chat before we started, and you said we're going to talk about big topics AI, and I went because I feel like that's the sentiment that is out there at the moment when it comes to AI. There is a level of fatigue that is happening. So I guess one of the things is how is that? Are you feeling that there is an we need to go back to the drawing board in terms of education, how it's changing buying behaviors, you know, and what again back to this question of what is the problem we are trying to solve?
Mm.
What are your biggest challenges when clients come to you with that magic box approach
Mm.
that you want to educate and go back to people and say these are the things you should really be thinking about AI or no AI before we go down this route?
That's exactly right. So yeah, we are seeing and hearing that. So I think anyone that says they're not getting a bit of fatigue around the term AI is probably lying. I'm in the business, and keeping up with the pace of change is it's a full-time job. It is exciting, but and there's so much we can do with it. But the pace of change is just unprecedented. So it is a bit exhausting. But yeah, and you're right. So we really see our customers in two camps, I guess, and it is probably the biggest part of my job is that education process, and trying to work out where customers are on their kind of on their learning journey around what AI really is. The two camps I would say are those that are I'd say actually most camps. Let's wind back a little bit. I think a lot of people are now in the sort of danger of viewing AI as one thing. I think that was one of the points you were making, right? That it's AI, and they're thinking about Gen AI, right? When they say that, they're thinking about Chat GPT. They're now their experience of AI is either Copilot or it's Chat GPT or it's Claude, and that is now what they think of as AI, and it is a magic box, and it can do everything. But beyond, and of course, it isn't. That isn't. AI is way more than that, and lots of different things. You then with that context, I think the customers then fall into two buckets. They either fall into the bucket of, well, look, it is amazing, but we're aware of the dangers, we're aware of the hallucinations, we're aware of the inaccuracies, and these things can be talked into different arguments depending on how much time you spend with them, right? So there's companies I think that are still very wary and actually have kind of put a blanket ban almost on using AI in recruitment. You then have the opposite end of the spectrum of customers who do see it as a magic box actually, and have very high degrees of expectation of what the AI can do. But I, personally at Hubert, we believe that is also not necessarily the right approach, and brings significant risk. And I think it in the middle is where you need to be. And it's, I guess to your point, AI is way more than just Gen AI, right? And large language models. Those foundational frontier models are absolutely incredible. They're large by definition. They're rich in capability, but they are fraught with challenges. And there are limitations right now, and that may change, but there are limitations, well-documented limitations. And so they have to be used in the right place in the right way. I think that's what we come down to. And AI isn't just one thing. So AI is machine learning, spotting patterns. It's small language models. There's all sorts of other branches of AI that can be used in a hybrid way that actually makes AI safer, both for candidates and for the enterprises that are trying to deploy this. So I think AI is fantastic, and it isn't a binary choice. I think that's what it comes down to. It shouldn't be a binary. Do we trust it or do we not trust it? There is a middle ground.
And I think when we talk about AI, personally, I appreciate when I watch a marathon of what we would call the Great British Baking Show, but Bake Off, and then I constantly am fed algorithms of other cooking shows. Is it cake and whatnot? Not to drop any specific names, but that's a form of AI and algorithms and machine learning that we've had part of our lives for many years now. And I think going back to your experience point, there's a lot of talk about AI for AI's sake, and using, whether it's corporate buzzwords that we're using this to become more efficient, we're using this, and it's really just stacking AI on top of what they're doing and not being intentional about it. So when you are talking to be it clients or people that you're advising, in terms of being intentional, how do you help them shift that frame of mind so they're not just saying, well, give us your technology and all of a sudden our recruiting process is going to be better? I mean, there has to be some intentionality behind it and be deliberate to make sure that you're getting the best possible experience out of whatever tech you're using, whatever tool you're using. In this case, we're obviously talking about what you do, but how do you have that conversation, which could sometimes be a difficult conversation because a lot of companies, I would imagine, just want you to come in, set it up, and hands off and do the work for them.
Yeah, and I hate to say that there are vendors out there that are promising the earth, right? There are vendors out there with shiny demos, and many of them, many of them that have sprung up in a very short time frame, with very, very sexy looking demos that are promising to do everything. Agents that can do everything for you, and I think that's extremely risky. Our approach, we're all about enterprise safety. We're all about brand safety, and we're all about safety for the candidate. We actually recently released a candidate pledge that is all about putting the candidate at the center of everything that we do, because we think that's what our customers care about too. To your earlier point, I think when we're having those conversations with customers, the first thing we do is wind it back to the problem they're trying to solve. Do we both recognize the same problem? And is that a problem that Hubert is actually designed to solve? Number one, right? Is that something we can solve? And if that problem is the problem that we described at the beginning, there's lots of challenges and opportunities in the industry right now, but this talent differentiation crisis is definitely one of them. And so if that is what you want to solve, then the question is, what is the right way to do that? What is the right process for the candidate? And then what is the safest way to ensure fair, accurate, explainable outcomes for the candidate? And this is where the rubber hits the road. And this is a challenge because this is where things start to get a little technical. Because, Karla, back to your earlier point, and I said I'd come back to it. You said, are we AI, right? I mean, we've got Hubert AI is in our URL. But actually, our platform isn't all AI. And a lot of vendors are the same, right? Just because the vendor has AI in the title doesn't mean that every single thing we do is AI. And it certainly doesn't mean that everything we do is Gen AI or large language model or an agent. So actually, we talk about the term being agentic, but a big chunk of what we do at Hubert isn't agentic. So to be agentic, the tool needs to be autonomous, self-learning, goal-orientated. They can take a task and run with it, right? And actually, in some areas, some use cases, that's a great use of an AI agent. When it comes to scoring a human being, assessing and ranking candidate to solve that problem that we just described. You've got to be able to score and assess and rank candidates, right? You've got to be able to, otherwise you're not solving the problem. And the rubber hits the road at how you do that, and how you do that in a way that is fair, that is reasonable, that can be explained to a candidate, that can be explained in a court of law that's legally defensible, right? So there's a lot of new legislation coming on all of this. There's existing laws. And fundamentally, we're protecting human rights here, right? So how you do that scoring and assessment, that's the critical piece. And certainly for Hubert, that's where we have an opinion on, that there is a right way to do that.
Where are you seeing the biggest surprises now? You've obviously collected a certain amount of data and insights from a lot of these interviews, and I'd imagine people trying to source talent and go down this road, their ears will really be sticking up or pricking up for that information to know what are the wins you've had and surprises you've had, and where's the next direction kind of leading with this.
Yeah, I guess surprises. That's a good question. I think in terms of wins, for me, the biggest one is the feedback we get from candidates. So back to your point earlier about, sort of some of the things you hear on social media and in news reports about candidates' opinions towards using AI or being interviewed or assessed by AI. Um, when I joined Hubert, actually, that was one of my biggest questions. I totally get it from a recruiter's point of view. I can see from an enterprise point of view the efficiency that you can get, the productivity that you can get, which is a great word for the enterprise, but not so exciting necessarily for the candidate um, who wants to be treated like a human being, right? So that was one of my number one questions. Is I get it from a company point of view, I get it from the recruiter point of view, but do candidates really want to go through a process like this? And I think the answer is no in some cases for some of the other legacy platforms that have been out there. But for Hubert, the answer is yes. And so we ask every candidate to give us a rating at the end of their experience, and we ask them to explain why they gave us that rating. And the overwhelming feedback we get from candidates is really positive. It's fair, it's unbiased, it's clearly Hubert is clearly following. We use structured interviews, so we're following role specific structured interviews that use well established interview methodologies. We've not invented new science. We've just taken well established best practices and brought them into the world of AI, into a really simple and intuitive interface that is clearly giving candidates a fair experience. They can apply on their own time, on their own terms. They get immediate feedback. They're not throwing an application into a black hole. I think they've got used to not hearing back from recruiters, unfortunately. And actually they get fair and reasonable feedback. And we're not replacing really a human part of the process. We're replacing a part of the process that's quite broken and very inhuman already, and accelerating their ability to connect with a real human as the next stage in the process. So yeah, so I think, to me, back to your question, what surprised me in a really good way is candidate feedback. When you get it right, candidates actually do appreciate the experience. So yeah, I think that's our biggest surprise. And I think the other thing is customers. We are seeing customers now really starting to mature in the questions they're asking when they're looking to adopt AI. So we've kind of had I called it, I don't know if this resonates with you, though, at one point, the AI hokey cokey, maybe like a year ago. Everyone was in and then everyone was out, and back and forth, kind of, we want AI, no, we've got to hold back, we're worried about the risks, and we see good news, bad news stories every day. You can see, literally hour by hour, good news and bad news stories on AI. So I think there's been a lot of indecision around whether to use AI, but I think, again, what we said earlier, it's not a binary choice. I think customers are starting to realize now it isn't a, yes or no, we can, we can't use AI. The devil is in the details. Specifically, what are we trying to do, and where is it safe to use AI, and where is it, Where do you need more deterministic scoring methodologies, for example, which is what we do at Hubert?
So you put the LLM in, you take the LLM out, and then you shake it all about.
There's a little bit of that. Yeah, look, I mean, I feel like I should probably explain, because I've said it a couple of times that we do things differently. And I've dangled the carrot, but I haven't really explained what I mean by that. And specifically what I mean by that is that we're not anti-LLM. So LLMs they're enormously powerful. They are improving exponentially, and they can be used to create tremendous experiences, amongst other things. So, but they've got to be used in the right way, for the right tasks. So at Hubert, if you think about it, the kind of interface that the candidate experiences, that's a combination of a small language model. That's a language model that we've built and control. And we augment that with third-party large language models. And that gives us the ultimate kind of mix of control and safety and configurability. So you know exactly how it's going to respond. It's brand safe, it's candidate safe, while bringing the large language models in to add what they're great at, which is that extra level of human-like experience. Where we think right now using large language models is still very risky is in the scoring and the assessment and the ranking of the candidates. And that's where we don't use large language models. We've used some of them to do some of the training of some of our models, but actually, as we're doing the assessment, as we're assessing the answers that candidates give to structured skills-based interview questions, we're using over 100 of our own hard-coded deterministic algorithms, which ensures every candidate will be measured fairly, consistently, in a way that is explainable, that is legally defensible, and that's really important. So it's that hybrid use of technology, and it's evolving. We have a watching brief, and some argument, some camps will argue that these large language models are getting more deterministic, or they will be eventually. The architects of those platforms aren't saying that. The Dario Modis and Sundar, at Google, they're not saying that these are going to get deterministic and repeatable and explainable anytime soon. Currently, they're still very much a black box. But we have a watching brief, and these things may evolve. But right now, we think that's what's important, is that hybrid mix, using those large language models at what they're best at, and combining that with proprietary technology to be safe. I think that's the right approach.
And Greg, I want to stay on LLMs real quick, because you mentioned the timeline of when Hubert actually started as a company, and that was based on the timeline and when we look at when LLMs burst onto the scene and really entered the consciousness of what we're going to be doing and using them for tools, that Hubert sort of predates when they burst onto the scene publicly and entered the popular culture mindset of AI, and of course that becoming ubiquitous with LLMs being AI and what we've already covered. In terms of what you've seen from a company perspective, how has that impacted what you do in terms of developing your models, using those tools, trying to keep the narrative more about what AI truly is versus, again, that everybody thinking AI is interchangeable with LLMs and vice versa? Has that made your life as a company more challenging because you're trying to, cast a wider net versus what the public consciousness of AI and LLMs might be?
Yeah, I think so, and it's created a lot of noise, right? And as we were sort of just mentioning, there's I forget how many it is. I think in the last 18 months, there's been like 500 new, HR technology platforms, at least probably maybe even more, that have come to market in the last 12, 18 months, right? And there is obviously this kind of wider question mark about whether SaaS is dead, and everyone can vibe code their own software, whether you're an individual, doing that in your living room, which I do, by the way. I've done some, built some apps in the last few weeks, or at enterprise level. Are we seeing a fundamental shift away from SaaS towards building your own technology. And, and of course that freedom has enabled hundreds of companies to produce, some very cool, slick looking demos, right? And early stage software. Hubert's 5 years old. I kind of feels a bit odd saying that we're kind of one of the, early starters. We're sort of a veteran in the market. But yeah, so it's definitely created noise. It's definitely created confusion and an initial wave of expectation. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because it's drawn awareness for the potential. But what we are now starting to see is a second wave of enterprises that have kind of been wowed by some of those technologies, and then started to look at, okay, well, what's the accuracy? What's the repeatability? What's the, what are the regulators saying? We're in the EU, right? So Hubert is a Swedish company. We were born out of Sweden. So we've architected ourselves to be EU AI Act safe from the ground up. And what we're now seeing is a second wave of enterprises starting to recognize that, there is a lot we can do with this technology, but there is also a lot of risk, and we've got to look at the specific details around how things are actually being done. Hubert actually, the founders of Hubert started the business, if you think about it, before ChatGPT became a household name. That's ridiculous to think, but it wasn't that long ago. We're not talking about many years ago. And so you could say, well, does that make us a bit old hat? And there's, new vendors on the market now, using new technology. The answer to that's no. Like we can use all the latest new technology. We do. We're using lots of third-party, very latest bleeding edge technology in what we do in our new product development. But the bit that is very hard for others to replicate is the data, the training, the models, right? We've developed, partly because we had to in the early days, but it's turned out to be one of our superpowers. We built a lot of our own models. We trained those models not with public data, not with internet data, not with synthetic data, but with IO psychologists, with HR experts. The original models were trained with with HR experts, and then augmented with other real world data sets. And that IP is extremely valuable. It's one of the big things that makes us compliant with existing laws and with the forthcoming regulations in the EU and I think in the States as well. And that is a moat. That is a technology moat. It's a data moat, and it isn't something you can vibe code in 6 months. The interfaces, the conversational UIs is anyone can do that now. That's the easy bit. But being compliant and fair and ethical to the candidate is not something that is easy to do.
That's an interesting thing. I was going to actually ask you a question about that because we have a global client council, and that is one of the observations that they're coming up with is they're feeling that the early adopters, the AI leaders, are kind of being displaced by newer, faster providers. So in essence, the governance and the compliance and the ethical and original of your original data input is what, if I'm summarizing this, is what makes you stand out, if we answer that question.
Yeah, correct. It's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of technologies and years of experience at enterprise scale, right? So we work with large enterprises. We have done now for many years. There's a lot of learnings from that. A lot of fine tuning of our models, whether they're our algorithms or otherwise. And that isn't something you can shortcut, right? Being enterprise safe, there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot at stake. We're asking our customers to place some big bets, and it is really, really important, to meet. We have an ethical, responsible AI framework, which we've built on the back of these regulations, and it's not easy stuff to replicate.
I mean, 10 years ago, and you say this very convincingly, but 10 years ago, if you said our business is 5 years old, um, that seems quite long ago. I would have said, no, that doesn't seem quite long ago. That seems very, very young and immature, but it's quite remarkable.
It is moving very quickly. I mean, look, and our own development has never moved faster. In the last 6 months, we've done way more than we've done probably in the 3 years before. So I think so. We can all move quickly, right? So there are some impressive looking new starters for sure. That doesn't mean that companies like Hubert aren't able to move quickly. We absolutely are, but we carry with us a weight of experience, of what's right for candidates, the processes, the experience that candidates are looking for, the experience that recruiters are looking for. That's actually very, very difficult to shortcut the learnings. But as I keep saying, the most critical thing is the way that you actually score and assess and rank candidates. We're not the only ones saying this, by the way. The EU AI Act says the same, right? They classify this category of use of AI as a high risk. Doesn't mean we're all high risk. It just means that, as a buyer of the technology, you have more obligation on you to make sure that you really understand and have governance around the products that you're buying, right? So the lawmakers, the regulators agree, and as I said, the founders and architects of the large language model platforms themselves, I think currently would still agree that they're not deterministic. They are prone to filling data gaps and being inaccurate, etc. And they're not currently designed for the use case of hiring humans, not in this way.
Well, going back to Karla's point, I have lost all sense of time thanks to the pandemic. During the pandemic, we have seen this idea of all companies are tech companies. We've said that. A lot of companies have said that. Every company is now a tech company in some way, shape, or form. You sit at an interesting intersection where you're very much interacting directly with people, but using a key piece of tech to do so. How do you balance being tech driven, but people focused? Because we have said, the human first, digital always. But I would imagine that's a unique challenge for you and Hubert as a company. So how do you do that? How do you balance that?
Well, first of all, we completely believe the same thing. So that's fundamental to our core beliefs, is that we're not here to replace humans. We're here to support and augment and genuinely, enable human recruiters to do more meaningful things, right? So, and as I said earlier, we're not replacing, and in many cases, we're not replacing a human part of the process. We're replacing a part of the process that's broken, right? We've got to remember that the world has changed. We're not talking about bringing efficiency to what recruiting was like 2 years ago. We're talking about trying to solve modern challenges where applications have risen, candidates are using AI, and so that's number one. We're I think when we talk to recruiters, a lot of them are saying they're overwhelmed. They can't cope with the volume of applications. They're struggling to meet hiring quality targets because they don't know who to shortlist. Candidates are getting put in the bin, right? The experience for a candidate is falling through the floor, and candidates are ghosting recruiters. Recruiters are turning up on telephone interviews. You can't do 500 telephone interviews. Most companies can't do 500 telephone interviews, and when you turn up, you finally select someone and they don't turn up, or they can't remember what job they've applied for. The whole thing's completely broken. So that gap in the candidate experience and the recruiter experience has to be bridged, and I think that's what we're doing, and we're doing it in the most human way that we can. We're not trying to pretend to be human. Hubert is very clear that he is AI, but I think we're enabling humans to make more meaningful connections faster.
I mean, I feel like we could have an ongoing conversation for significantly longer, so we'll have to come back and revisit, down the road.
This is the scary thing, because
Yeah.
it's more normally like when we meet you in a year's time, we'll come back to this topic and see how things have changed. And it feels like, well, that might be 3 months and things will have flipped on its head.
Yeah,
Completely. Yeah, the world is moving quick. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the questions we get asked, and again, it kind of ties in a little bit to your point earlier, like how do you make a decision as a vendor, right? So when none of us can predict the future, we've had this situation before. Like we had this when the internet was invented, when cloud computing was in. I'm showing my age now. I was around then. When we moved from on-prem to the cloud, and every time we have new technology, companies are worried about jumping too quick, jumping too slow, choosing the wrong vendor. I think we're seeing that kind of on steroids a little bit at the moment because things are moving so quick. And I think the answer to that is, if you hang around and wait to see who's going to have, the best tech, right, you're going to have a very long wait because things are going to keep changing very quickly. And I kind of always said this, and I've been a customer. I've been on the other side of the fence, by the way. I've been a buyer of technology, and this is how I approached things when I was a buyer of technology: is choose the partner that you think is most aligned, that is aligned with your values, aligned with your vision, and is right now in a leading position, and that you can be assured has the resources and the wherewithal and the vision to stay in a leading position, in a sustainable leading position over time. I think that's, to me, that's the best way. Partner with your vendor, choose a vendor, lock in, partner, work together to innovate.
Certainly worked with us because it's 73 years going on ManpowerGroup, 5 years Hubert AI.
Exactly.
And for those of you who are listening and don't know, but there is a announcement on our partnership recently. So it's very exciting, and we're really glad to have been able to share some of the, underlying, I don't want to call them myths, but what people don't unpack about AI and kind of generically just throw out in the wash that we talk about. So it's been an eye-opening for me. And I think we're going to come back to this conversation several times. And if people have got more for us to ask you and unpack, then that's great, and we can come back to some of that. But Greg, it's been great to have you with us. And I think to John's point, we could carry on for a long time talking around this topic.
I just want to thank Greg. I know this has been a wide-ranging conversation, and certainly it's a wide-ranging field, and still feels like, to use the parlance here in the United States, the Wild West. But I think if we were to look at a crystal ball, it feels like some clarity might be on the horizon. I don't know what that is. I certainly wish I did, and if I did, I would buy more lottery tickets or play the market a little bit more. But it feels like the cream is starting to rise to the top, as it were, and we will see what happens and how things continue to shake out over the next coming months, coming years, and certainly, watching the Hubert story intently as we go.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, Karla. I really appreciate it. As you say, we're very proud of our relationship with Manpower, and thank you very much for having me today. Likewise, as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate on the subject. I could talk forever on the subject. So I hope this has been useful in some way. I hope we've probably just scratched the surface. Anyone listening's probably got 1,000 questions now. But really appreciate you giving us the opportunity.
And if they do, Greg, where can they get hold of you? Just to, so that I think it's great to for you to take that next question further.
Yeah, great. LinkedIn. You'll find me on LinkedIn. You'll Greg Dunbar on LinkedIn. You'll also find me at Greg at Hubert.ai. So yeah, please do get in touch. And I think we're all on a journey together. Everyone's learning. There is a lot to learn. Every day there's more news, and we'd love to be a trusted partner and share insights.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having us on the Work Intelligence Lab, and we'll be back with you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.